Okay. So, it's a little later today than I normally am. I'm not quite as fresh as a daisy as I am normally, just quite a daisy. I got so desperate for more tea that I actually took a cup of tea, put it in the microwave, and heated it up. And, well, I heated up an already made cup of tea. Then I put some milk in it. Now, this is an indication of just how desperate I was for a cup of tea, because it's just going to taste lousy. But it isn't going to taste as lousy, well, as just about any cup of tea I've had at any hotel or way station or roadhouse in the South, where they truly make the most awful, god-awful tea I have ever had in my life. It's almost, you get to the point where you're like, just bring me the hot water, please. They're like, don't you want a tea bag? And I'm like, no, that's fine, thanks. I'll just get some carpet sweepings of my own. I'll just go out to the road and brush some dust into a dustpan, and then I'll just shoot it right into the cup of tea, and then, oh my god, cup of tea. Okay, the worst cup of tea I ever had that was actually made by a human being deliberately was, and it wasn't it wasn't an act of evil or something like that. It wasn't deliberately. It wasn't set up to be deliberately horrible, but it just, oh my god. We'd been driving all over the place, and we'd been driving quite a long time. We were visiting the Rellies, and some of the Rellies we wanted to visit, and the other Rellies we didn't necessarily want to visit. But unfortunately, they were all in the same place, so we had to, if you could just pick and choose, but you can't. You gotta go. So if you want to see your, yeah, anyway, you get the point. I mean, I'm sure you've all had this kind of experience where, you go for some holiday and you think, if only I could just see relatives, B, M, and X. It would be good. BMX? But that's not how it works. So, anyway, there we were in this place, and one of them said to me, or said generally to us as we arrived, do you want a cup of tea? And I was like, oh, yeah, bring out the barrel. I'm gonna hit that. And so she went to the sink and she ran some tap water into a mug. Now, having been in this area, I've been doing some work in this particular geographical region. I've been there for a library. I knew that the local water was not great. I mean, it wasn't poisoned as far as I knew, but it just didn't taste great. I mean, some water, and a lot of it is just what you're used to. My experience with Ottawa water is that it's very sweet and it's lovely water. It's pure, and it's really, I don't know what feeds that reservoir, those reservoirs, but the water is just, it's lovely water. It's clear and crisp, and sharp, and doesn't have any abundance of chemicals. Anyway, but this water was not like that. So I was like, okay, this is not a good start. And she was making a cup, like she put the water into a cup, and I was like, I guess I'm getting a cup of tea. Okay, fine. So then she put a tea bag in it. I was like, oh, wow. That's hardcore. That's, ooh. And then she took it to the microwave and put it in the microwave for 2 minutes. I was like, holy Jesus. I don't know what that is gonna be, but it isn't gonna be tea. So then it came out. And the poor thing. And so I looked down and oh, you poor baby. And I was like, okay, well, the tea bag didn't die for nothing. I'm gonna drink this thing. So I can't remember if it got, like, whether I needed milk for that, because whatever it was going to be, it was certainly not going to be tea, and I definitely needed something to put in it, like give me some ketchup, like anything. I just let me put something into this. It's got to improve it. And I'm trying to remember whether they actually had milk or whether they just had cream. And I'm like, I don't care. If it's white, I'll put it in there. Give me some cornstarch, I'll put that in. And so then I swizzled it around, and I gave it a chance to steep. I'm not really sure how it was going to get any. I'm not sure how it was going to steep, but anyway, it probably was going to get shallower. Anyway, so I gave it a chance to steep, and then I drank it. And as an indication of how stressed out I was, that I actually drank this, whatever this was. Anyway, it was an interesting drink, but when people have like offer you sort of salted or buttered, like buttered tea, that's quite interesting. I mean, that's a whole different ball game. I mean, and it's very filling because it's got fat in it, right? And you're just drinking the fat, so it's very rich. Well, that's different. And chai, of course, is very different. Anyway, everything is a different thing. And so anyway, I drank that, and I was like, okay, well, it's better than being on the road. So, and I appreciated the effort that went into it. I appreciated that she asked, and I appreciated the hospitality. And so then at a certain point, I was sitting there, and my system started fighting with it. So there was an internal struggle over what product was. And so then this person said to me, "Oh, do you want some more tea?" And I was like, "Yeah, no, thanks. I'm good." I said, "No, I'm good." I was like, and my instant sort of response, like, "Yeah, no, wait. Oh, hold on a second." Oh man, probably the second worst cup of tea I had, but that was made with such goodwill and with warmth that it was, it was just a bad drink. Like, it wasn't horrible. It was just wasn't tea. I mean, I don't know what it was, but it wasn't. But probably the worst cup of tea I actually ever had was at one of these bloody pretentious local places, and it was some Buddhist, Buddhist event. Buddhist. I'm just thinking about the guy who tried to stay in one of the Disneyland theme parks. Like, he went to this island. He said, "The island looks like paradise." And then they got him. They just hauled him off. And no trespassing. Disney will not tolerate trespassing in their private islands. So anyway, I can imagine like a Buddhist theme park, Anyway, this was like that. This restaurant was like a Buddhist theme park. Like, you went in and you had to have the full experience. And it was so we ordered tea, of course. I mean, you're going to get in there like, we have this kind of high end. I was like, yeah, just bring us the house brand, waiter, and namaste. And so the guy he brought us each a cup. I'm like, could you spring for a pot of tea, like an actual, like, you didn't put that in the microwave, did you? So anyway, but they brought us a cup. And I was about to go for it, and he said, "Oh, you have to lift the lid, and then you have to, breathe in the steam and the fragrance and the odor." I was like, "Dude, it's been a really long week, and I didn't actually come here for Dharma lessons. I came here to get some frickin' food and some frickin' tea, and I'll decide when I'm going to have a mindful experience with my frickin' tea. And it isn't going to be right now. And it's especially not going to be now because I don't need instruction from you about how to live my life. Thank you very much." Everything went downhill from there. I didn't actually say any of that to him. I was just like, ugh, because I was like, oh, that put me off. That put me off my tea. It was a shocking experience. Anyway, so I heated up. Okay, enough of the yabbering. Today it's Ronan. Now I know you're saying, but Tim, you've given us a lot of macho, manly, manly films. It's like, well, not too many. I've been trying to watch that because, a lot of, yeah, I've been trying to, like yesterday or 2 days ago, we did Chicken Run, right? And I wanted to talk a little bit, I didn't talk about that, about how the film was made, but it actually is also stop motion, and which means they have, you got to see the making of, because they've got, a million different faces, so when they want to animate these chickens talking, their mouths talking, you have to actually animate the lips, and you have to know what shapes when you're doing drawn animation, or you're doing, it doesn't, any kind of animation, if you're animating dialogue, and the cheapest thing to do for animation is just so you just keep the person's mouth closed and you just talk, right? And everybody sort of accepts, like, oh, I guess they're talking. But actually, if you're going to animate somebody talking, you have to actually make the right vowel shapes and sounds, that is, the right shapes to match the sounds. And so the mouth, you have to learn the shapes of the mouth when it's saying the vowels and when it's saying the major phonemes. So what does a f look like, and what does a th look like, and those kinds of things. And Park and Lord are very good about that, because they very often the characters put their tongues, they have these big teeth, all these big teeth, and they put their tongues, let's see if I have it here. Whoops. This is a book about the making of Chicken Run, Hatching, the movie. And you can see, well, here you can see Ginger's teeth there. They always do, these big teeth, and they almost always, they show phonetically what's happening, so that the tongue comes out. So it's part of sort of what makes them so funny. Yeah, so remember I was talking about Wallace and Gromit. So here, if you haven't seen Wallace and Gromit before, here they are. And there's Gromit behind the newspaper. He's the intelligent one, as I mentioned, and Wallace with his big teeth. Anyway, so that's stop motion animation, right? So it's not so drama. So that means they actually have to put a different, if they're going to animate the one of the chickens talking, and they are, then they have to put on the different lips that are going to animate that. So they have to, so they have to say this, and so they have to put on all the different lips that say, so they have to say this, and they have to animate that so it's smooth. So they have hundreds of lips and, eyes and eyelids and, all laid out. Anyway, it's amazing. So I am trying to make sure that you don't get too much, boys own story stuff, and we're getting a mixture of things. But this is an amazing book, partly because the art is so gorgeous, and partly because Miller probably was the first Westerner in the comics world to understand how manga operated. I think until that time, there were people who read manga, who read Japanese, and there were people like Stan Sakai, who does Yojimbo. It's a comic actually called Yojimbo. That seems wrong. Yeah, no, that's right. And it's not my favorite. I mean, he's a great artist. Sakai can draw anything, and his character is a bunny rabbit, and he's dressed in a kimono and with the katana, and so Sakai was sort of trying to find his feet with this character. This is, I don't know, 40 years ago. He's been drawing this character for 40 years, and then at one point he drew his bunny rabbit with his ears up, and he put in the same way that the Japanese, the samurai, make a top knot out of the hair to indicate that this is part of their honor. It's part of the sign of the code. So he draws Yojimbo's ears up, the bunny's ears up, and then he puts it, and that's it. It's like that's the character just forms, and he goes off into the. So Stan Sakai certainly understood that, and he did his own, essentially did Western manga. But Miller he just understood the way that the Japanese were able to essentially make film in comics. And it's a very intriguing, what people would, in the fancy world, would call remediation, where he's able to take one medium and represent it in another in a way which is quite successful. Now, the manga was already doing this, and this is the amazing thing. And I should have gotten some manga. I'll get Lone Wolf and Cub, and we'll look at some pages, because Miller owes a huge debt to not just all manga, or in the Korean manhwa. It's very different, actually. Korean manhwa is very different. It's much more. It's much less filmic. And I haven't read much manhwa. I've read some. I've read, I don't know, maybe 20 volumes or something like that. Which is not a lot. Are you kidding me? Who's phoning now? Oh, for goodness sakes! Just hold on a second. Okay. While I was off on my time traveling there, I picked up some Lone Wolf and Cub to show you the influences that these folks, many of these people, had on Miller. What's important about the manga scene, basically in the late 70s, early 80s, is that there was very little manga that had been actually translated into English. I don't remember actually being able to get any in Toronto. There were a few things, and they were really not particularly striking examples of the art form. Miller, because he was extremely popular, probably had people bringing him things, and he may have gone to Japan. My guess is he probably did. And he probably was. I guess he was looking at Japanese. I think he was looking at manga in Japanese, and he almost certainly was looking at. Well, he for sure was looking at Lone Wolf and Cub. And so, Lone Wolf and Cub. This is one of the little books. This is a sort of replica of a tankobon, which is the name of the volume. And it would have, in this case, it would have how many chapters in this? 5 chapters, yeah. Actually, there are usually more chapters in Tankobon. But Dark Horse has done a nice little job with these. So there are actually 28 of these little books like this that make up the whole cycle that tells the story of Lone Wolf and Cub, also known as Baby Card Assassin, Baby Card Assassin at the River Styx, Ito Ogami, who is the name? Ogami Ito. It's basically the story of a samurai who, his lord is shamed. Pardon me. Yeah, no, that's right. It's been a while since I read the whole cycle. He, however, is framed because he's the shogun's. Oh, okay, it doesn't have to have. Sorry, it has to do with his family. So the Yagyu clan wants his position. He's the shogun's executioner. That is, he does executions for the shogun. He doesn't kill the shogun. He does executions for the shogun. And so he's a very fine swordsman. He has his own school. Okay, and he has his dear wife and so on. So the Yagyu. And I don't think I've got him in this book. Maybe I do. The clan is run by this old man who is... here he is here. Here's the old man. And you can see he's lost an eye, and he's got a... This is very interesting. This is actually... it's like the basket on a fencing foil. So it protects your hand. So it's the grip, it's the handguard. Yeah, that's right, on a katana. and you can see because it has, one side is narrower and one side is wider. They're beautiful pieces of work. These things alone are just astonishing. I remember seeing a display of them at some, I don't know, some museum I went to. Can't remember where. Anyway, there was a display, and they're just gorgeous. I mean, they're pieces of metalwork, and they have the family crest on them, and they have sometimes they have little narratives on them, but usually it's sort of pattern work. And, it's amazing. Anyway, so this is the old man. So the old man is jealous of Ogami's position, and he wants the position so that he can take over the shogunate. So he's crooked. And Ogami, of course, is a man of honor. His wife is basically assassinated. His family is dishonored, and so he's supposed to kill himself. He's like, he's not doing that because he knows that this is exactly what his enemies want. So he goes on the road. He takes it on the lam with his boy Daigoro, and this is Daigoro here, showing a lot more fear than he normally does. Usually, Daigoro is a poker face. The child is basically a samurai. Here you'll see him. Just see him here. And he's complete. I think he's supposed to be 3 or 4, and he is completely a samurai's child. Here they are together, and so he's an amazing character on his own. There's a story late in. There's one of the chapters late in the series where he's separated from his father, and because the enemies are convinced that if they can just separate them, they can weaken Ogami. Well, Ogami can't be weakened. He's like, no. He and his son have accepted the road of death, and if one of them dies first, well, that's how it is. It's just so he cannot be threatened. He cannot. There are no hostages to fortune here. They are samurai. And so the boy, so they're separated, and for a while, the two stories diverge. And it's really the stories about Daigoro are amazing. And at one point, he's the boy is caught. Like they decide to kill the boy, and so they set fire to a field around him. Is my memory of it. And they think they're going to burn him to death, but they won't actually have to kill him. So it just looks like he's somehow burned to death by accident. And so, he stands there and he just watches the fire. He's just completely, not afraid. There is no fear because he's going through the gateless gate, right? I mean, this is a kid who is he is Zen. I mean, he is a warrior. So there is no fear. There is only watching and action. And, it's a great, it's a wonderful role. The series is wonderful. They made 6 movies, which get more and more ridiculous as you go on. But the first couple are quite well capture the flavor of the manga. Then they get more and more ridiculous, partly because Ogami has this wonderful baby cart, this thing here, which is something like during the winter he puts it on skis, which they had, it puts it on runners. And, it turns out that it's actually, he lines it with iron, so it's actually bulletproof, and, it's got the handles of the cart are actually spears, and, the cart's full of tricks. So it's sort of this James Bond cart. In the movies, they really make much of this, and things go sort of, by the time you get to the 6th one, it's like, okay, it's just sort of become like the late James Bond movies. It's like, well, okay, I'd say mid-period James Bond films. But anyway, so it's an amazing, so Daigoro is standing in the middle of this, field watching this fire just burn its way towards him. And there's a bucket of water or something like that, and he pours it out and he starts to make mud. And then he just gets in, he looks face down in the mud. And, of course, the fire just burns right over him, and he's fine. But they think he's dead, and then he gets up and he goes and rinses off in the river and on to the next adventure, and he's fine. And so when he reunites with the father, you're like, oh yeah. So the whole thing is one massive cycle. But you could sort of start anywhere if you know the characters. Basically, he's an assassin for hire, and he goes around, and people have to tell him the story of what the issue is if he's going to take on an assassination. And then he always charges, I can't remember what it is, 6 Rio, I think it is. These are gold pieces. And so he basically is saving up. And he's saving up basically to destroy the Yagyu clan and reinstall himself. Well, really, to redeem his honor. I mean, the rest of it's unimportant. He doesn't care. He can make a living. So he's an assassin for hire. And Daigoro always goes with him. And so he listens to the story, and then he decides to take the job or not. And it's usually to write an injustice. A hugely popular series. Oh my God, very popular in Japan. Here are the guys who are responsible for it, Koike and Kojima. These guys would have run a studio where they would have had, my guess is something like 30 artists working for them, producing the book. And with some people, I mean, people were hired on, and all they did for like 2 years was draw fields. Like, they were allowed to draw backgrounds. And when they finally got a sense of how what the studio's art form was, or what the studio's style was, they were allowed to take on, background characters and so on. But this is why people leave other established studios to go and start their own, because basically they want to do their own characters. Now, people are like, oh, it's interesting. Westerners hear that and they're like, oh, this is just slavery. It's like, well, how do you think Disney operates? Or any of the companies, basically. They all operate this way. You got to get in. You got to learn a house style. They're not going to let you draw Ariel, the mermaid, like as if she looks like, Kristen Wiig. Like, forget that. You got to match the house style. People don't want to see Mickey Mouse as if it was drawn by, Jackson Pollock. It's like, that's not going to fly. Might fly once. Anyway, so these are a little bit small, but the story I would love to show you is called The Chains of the Kurokawa, and it's just it's such an amazing story, and the form matches the content just so perfectly. But that I'm not sure where that story is in the narrative arc. So rather than do that, I just sort of picked a volume at random. So you can see here how cinematic this manga is. And so we can read from this way, from the top down, left to right. But normal manga, of course, doesn't read that way. You have to. They finally stop flopping it. They stop reversing it. So you actually have to read. When you're reading manga, you read from here over and down, and then you read onto the left-hand page and so on, and you turn towards the back of the book. Anyway, but okay, so you're getting basically the establishing shot. It's sunrise, the birds, and then there's this incredible sort of these palanquins, and it's something is going on. Some people or some goods are being carried, and maybe it's presumably there's been a death of some kind. We don't know. So we see here, might be the widow. The men are sad. They're carrying this thing. So probably they're carrying a coffin, but you don't know, right? And they're all looking down. And so it's just a series of like all these images, basically, of mood, right? So a Westerner would turn the pages of this incredibly quickly. It's like, okay, nothing's going on. Next, it's like, whoa. All kinds of things are going on. You got to look at the attitudes and look at the way that the camera, essentially, for want of a better word, the way that the people are being framed. We're looking down on the woman here. We're looking at the profile here. Men are all in profile, and so on. And then we get to this kind of thing where the action starts to happen. So we're on the seashore, and you begin to see. So here are the advancing men, and we see the group is advancing to us only by showing you that this is the foreground, that's the background, and the background essentially is getting bigger. They're coming towards us, basically. and then they stop and they look up. So the signs for surprise in American comics would be, say, little what are called plues. They look like little teardrops, people and their eyebrows raised and so on. But you get the same thing here, but you see these lines that are coming out from basically the center of where this is the vanishing point of view right about there. These lines are pointing to it, which indicates that they're looking up suddenly, right? And then there's quick motion. How do we know it's quick? Well, apart from the speed lines as they're called behind them, the feet are running, right? And we see thud, thud, thud. Okay. Now, again, the sounds in manga actually have meanings because there are noises in manga for things like, especially this kind of chanbara, which is basically these swords and fencing, swords and samurai comics. That's the genre, basically, is period. So in Chanbara comics, there's a sound for blood hitting a paper screen because the houses are full of paper screens, right? So, or of sword cutting through bamboo. I mean, there's actual specific noises for these things. So you would know that. Anyway, so they're going to be under attack. That's what's coming, right? So we see here the shadowy figure, leaping out of this apparently abandoned house. Then the running. Then here comes the attack, rah, and here comes the guy. And we have all these different action shots. Okay, so all these things are happening. And the panels tend to reflect the shape of what's happening. So again, this is not the best example, but the way you can see the panels are not straight, but are the divisions, the gutters are slanted in this case. And I chose this one because there's one where there's a sort of, when you get fast action, quick action, you tend to get a lot of very narrow panels. Now the theory here is that action which happens quickly is a series of slices, basically of quick moving time. And then when you have something which is, then there's a long static shot, you exactly get that. So here's Ogami Ito with Daigoro, and here they are in this field of slaughter, which they are. He's looking at these two people. This is a different story. So you can see, it's pretty gruesome, but it's a fairly standard sort of scene. So like what happened, but it's static, right? So it's slow, and so when there's action, there's usually there are these action lines. So, and the page becomes much more chaotic, busy. It isn't really chaotic because it's very highly organized, but it looks busier. So you'll see these speed lines are being used to indicate how much motion there is and how much speed there is going on. Okay, so Miller learned from that. And so in Ronin, what happens in Ronin, the story of Ronin is you would think it's sort of, it would seem fairly simple, but it is not. So this is really Frank Miller's it's kind of his breakout, his breaking away from, it's in many ways one of the most important books he did, because up until this point he'd been doing Daredevil, and he had really good ideas about Daredevil. I think he was like, I don't know, 19 or something like that, 20 when he started doing Daredevil. I mean, incredibly talented guy. And when he did Ronin, my memory is that he was 23. So, just a natural storyteller. I mean, just somebody who just understood the form and just sort of a really, yeah. so you'll see, like I'll find you. Okay, so here's an example. Ironically, this is a very good example of the way that manga uses action or shows action. So it's a whole series of little tiny clips or strips like this of like shot, 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 of what's happening. Um, and where a lot of the action is shown, it's implied, so that you don't necessarily see all the moments of the action. You see the end of it, so that you see the sword is broken or something like that. Yeah, so like here, I mean, this is just a beautiful page here. This is not, I don't think, this is not a genius page, but it's just a really beautiful. Anyway, so here, here's our man attacking this rat, and then there's this wonderful silhouette, right, of the two of them fighting up here, and it's just like it's just so beautifully designed. I mean, here's somebody who just understands, I think, Eastern design from a Western point of view. That's a bit hard to see, maybe. So the story is a combination of, so we have here in the exposition, basically, the master and the samurai. And the master is training the samurai, and then they get betrayed almost immediately. And this is very much this page here, these two pages here, it's a series of fight scenes. And the chains and the whole thing, it comes pretty much straight out of Lone Wolf and Cub, this little series. Not so little. Amazing. I mean, this series is important to Japan as, say, Batman is to the West. I mean, it's just impossible to overstate, or Superman, to overstate its significance. Anyway, Ronan, the character, so he is now thrown, he's a masterless samurai, and he's thrown into the future. And it's actually still our future. It hasn't happened yet. And in the future, it's actually a cyberpunk text, and it comes out just around the same time that William Gibson does Neuromancer. So all this stuff is starting, it's like this fusion. And so here we have Billy, who is a disabled person who's kept in this sort of, he seems to be a sort of child, and he's kept in this perpetually hooked up state where he runs things. And Virgo, so here we have the city, and Miller often is focused on the city. Now at this point he'd been doing the city for Daredevil, so you get used to seeing Manhattan, Hell's Kitchen, and so on. And Miller is going to carry that over. He's going to take Daredevil, and he's going to make Daredevil into a sort of almost medieval Japanese sort of. He's going to infuse it with that. And so the Hand with Stick, who trains Daredevil how to control his senses and so on, which you see in the Marvel series, the two series about Daredevil. It was reasonably promising. I think they could have gone on with that. But anyway, so here we have the city is being taken over by Virgo. And Virgo is this sort of green, growing cybernetic thing, and it's not exactly clear like, is Virgo an AI and it's a woman or what. Now what's interesting at the time, as you can see, I'm not sure if you can actually see it because of this camera here, maybe you can, but up here, if you look in the shadows, you see that there's actually hatching, what looks like very, very fine hatching in the shadows. And this is paper, which at the time, because there were, as I said, there were no computers. There were no computers that could do this stuff, even on screen. So this is all done by hand, but there were papers that you could get, which had embedded in them tones. One tone that went one way and one tone that went the other way. Then they would have different kinds of tones in them. Like some of them were just straight lines, which is what you've got in this case. Some of them would be like a mezzotint sort of pattern and so on. And you would so you would draw, and then you would get out a particular chemical, and one chemical would bring out one kind of line, and the other chemical would bring out the other kind of line. So you could paint with the chemical, and it would bring out this shadow. Otherwise, you had to put these shadows in by hand. You had to cut out actual strips of shadow. The people who did this were called the Ben-Day man, because this kind of dot here, so you knew how it reproduced, was called Ben-Day dot. Anyway, yeah. So in this case, you could actually paint on the paper. So you painted, and it would bring out this pattern. And if you brought in the other, you'd paint, and so they wouldn't go black, right? You could actually get grays. Okay, so that's what you're looking at there. It's a bit of an unusual thing. And so you can see here what we've got is a sort of future which is actually very dystopic, but it's very green, right? And so Billy here is able to take on and essentially telerobotics. Using telerobotics, is able to do things and build things and so on. Yeah, but here's Billy here. So he has no limbs, but he's able to control the things with his mind. So this is all gonna become a thing. So the Ronin, the masterless samurai, kills himself in order to kill Agat, who is the demon that has overseen basically the destruction of his master. And so it's the same kind of idea as Lone Wolf and Cub. And the thing about it is most of these ideas are the same, that something wants your downfall, and you spend the rest of the narrative redeeming yourself, basically. Well, okay, so the Ronin kills himself, and in killing himself, he kills Agat, the demon. And it tosses them both forward into the future, and they arrive, and so we have basically the orange-red of the past colliding with the green of the future. And so the monster takes over Billy, and the Ronin is free in the 23rd century. I think it's the 23rd century. And then it's chapter 2. so then there's a struggle, and so the Ronin meets basically his well, these are just gorgeous pages. I mean, wow, look at this. And you can see, we're a year and a half away from Watchmen, so you can see that things are just busting out all over. The whole genre, the whole medium is just coming apart. It's just being torn apart by these few people. But so I'm going to find you the place where. So Casey, this is an amazing page. So here we have a page where the Ronin essentially reformulates himself in the present as a warrior. So here he comes, on his white horse with his bow and arrow, which is and his two swords, the short sword and the katana. And they also trained as archers. I mean, a true samurai would have known, a true warrior would have known how to use all of these tools. And what's interesting about this, and this really looks ahead to 300, but what's interesting about it is that Miller sets up the page so you have to read it the way you would read a Japanese page, right? So you have to start up in the upper right corner and move across to the left and down. And it's this. So I often use this page. I used to when I was teaching Dark Knight, because this is the first thing. Well, this is the thing that comes it just precedes Dark Knight. So here he is, and he isn't just writing this; he's drawing it too, right? Amazing. Okay, so here we've got our Ronin. He fires an arrow. And we have to follow the arrow. So the arrow comes here, and so here's Casey, who will turn out to be his equivalent, basically his equal, his match, and his fellow samurai. And so she is running the men. She's got all her troops arrayed, and they're all getting arrows stuck in them. They're like, what's going on? They say, Jesus, how can he study? Look out that. Oh my God, study. Not yet, not yet. And then, so it's all this sort of stuff is happening. So we come down here, and then she says, fire, and they all fire, and it takes us out the other side of the page. So the whole thing makes this big loop, right? And so we have to we have to go all the way around the page. Amazing. And of course, he's on his horse, and she's been essentially given the power by Virgo, and so she's in the 21st century. And then this looks ahead to Sin City, where he just is like, maybe I don't need color at all. Maybe the way you show an explosion is that you overload the senses. So it's a very, it's a very smart book. So basically, the demon will begin to use the machines, and Ronan will make contact with Casey, the woman. And these are quite a lovely couple of pages. I have always liked these pages, where they find each other basically, and they take care of each other and make love, and it's very filmic. Like it's each of the there's sort of the close-ups on the very careful sort of looking at the hands and the gestures and the faces together and so on. Very filmic, and so the end of that book is like, and then here's the final shot. So you can see really how filmic it is. This grid looks ahead to Dark Knight, which is Miller is going to do. He's going to take this grid and he's going to say, let's make a whole book of just that grid. And he's really going to push the form. Oh boy. And so basically it's a story about the struggle for good and evil, or dark and light, for want of a better word, between Agathe in the future and Ronan in the future, and Casey, and it's fantastic. And at the end, and it's just such astonishing artwork. I remember the first couple of times I saw it, I was like, no, this is just it was too loose. But then at the end, he has these amazing, like, it's like, this had never been done in comics before. So typically we call these a gatefold, because it does exactly that. It essentially makes a gate, and you have to fold it out. So you can see here. Jeez, something's bonging away there. Yeah, okay, so, and then that's on that side. And then it actually opens out one more. You see that, right? So there's this explosion happening at the center of Virgo. And then on this side, this is sort of become the trope for devastation, right? Which is some kind of, not nuclear, but it's sort of a world-ending thing. And then a restoration, of course, because it has a happy ending. Of course it has a happy ending. I wouldn't be giving you some garbage. Now, just to show you that, that's you can get Ronan for, I don't know, what does this cost? $31. Yeah, I used to use this with my, I used to make these journalism students read this. They were like, wow, WTF. Okay, so as with Watchmen, there's an absolute Ronan, right? And so these are the two worlds, the orange world of the past. Jeez, that's irritating. What the heck's going on? Oh, whatever. Just put up with the bings and bongs. Okay, and then, and here's the cover. So this is Ronan there. And then here's Ronan also. And the book is beautiful. So they've taken the art from the inside and put it on these covers. So there's Casey. And so you can see, absolute Ronan. So I'll show you, for instance, the page with Casey attacking Okay. So this is a bit more true to the colors that Miller wanted. And you can see how much sharper and clearer and just bigger and more beautiful. Partly that's because it's been printed on white paper, which will just, or good plate chrome coated paper, which will show the colors because it bounces the light back through the color into your eyes, right? And instead of, in this case, not a lot of light is coming back through the page, right? So the way this works, like if we go back to that scene, which I will do. Okay, so we go back to this scene. The way that our eyes are perceiving this color is that, the color's on the page, right, and the light is bouncing through there and then bouncing into our eyes. So it's, light. Oh, for Christ's sakes! What the hell's going on here? I think Nord is like it's just going nuts. Okay, screw off, man. Enough. Wow. Sheesh. Okay. So the physics of comics, really any color. So your eye perceives this color because that particular chemical has been printed on the page with those set of pigments. But then the light bounces through it, and then light goes into it, and then whatever light is left bounces back into our eyes. Okay, well, there's a hell of a lot more light left on a page like this because the page is made of slick coated white stock, which is more like a mirror, and so it bounces off the page and comes blasting into your eye. So that's why comics look so much better when they're printed on good paper and so on. Yeah, so this is a beautiful. These absolute editions are gorgeous, but check this out. Wow! Look at this. Oh boy! Look at these drawings. Look at this thing. Wow! Somebody's getting killed. Okay. I hope they knew what they were in for. Not sure what that's all about. We should go find it. Okay. I was having a bit of a nightmare about this last night. Okay, so here, I got to back up. So here's the same gatefold, just like a double gatefold, which had never been done in comics before. And then here's the other side, right? Which shows you it's gorgeous. Just beautiful. So, what can I say? It's an amazing story about technology, our possession by technology, the role of the warrior, the hero. Or the hero is actually, there are two heroes here because, of course, there's Casey, and she will be incredibly important. Well, she's crucial to the story. And Agat, the monster. There's this amazing picture, or image of him holding up Ronan at one point. Let me see if I can find it. And it's just such a beautiful drawing. It's like we just get the size of this character, this demon. I may not be able to find it for you. Sorry about this. Talk amongst yourselves. It's even worse doing this in class. Yeah, this kind of thing, this kind of panel here, it gives you an idea of sort of the filmic quality of it, where you break up the smaller panel indicates further away, and our eye sort of naturally sees that. So here we have this sort of looping pattern. It's interesting that Miller wanted to make film, which he did, and he was never really very successful at it. Here we are. You can see oh man, here's the demon. And this, he's a wonderful character. He's he's so very intelligent and so very doomed. And so there's a parallel, basically. So you're never clear whether does a Gat appear as a robot to the people around him, and so on. Anyway, amazing book. And Virgo slowly takes over more and more of the city, so she sort of consumes more and more of it until we finally get. Just looking for one of these. Well, here, what started out as a dome has become this sort of massive infestation. Anyway, this ran longer than I expected. I think partly because I should talk about Lone Wolf and Cub separately. Maybe it's just that if you love if you want a real sort of epic adventure story, then get these. Now they don't make them this way anymore. They've brought them. I think they've collected them into 4. They've made 4 of these into one. So you should be able to get. You should be able to get the whole series in something like 7 volumes. I think that's right, because it's 28 books essentially, Tankobon. So, and then they are. It is amazing. It is epic, and it isn't just what's going on. Okay, between this and anyway, I'm so beset. The phone ringing. Oh dear. Okay, I will leave you. Soon to return.